I know that now Zoom announces it and also makes you approve it.
Yep.
So you may see me just tapping away over here, just taking some notes. And I apologize if you hear anything. They're doing construction next door to my house today.
No worries.
Awesome. So just for the record, tell me your name, your position, and your company.
Joseph Lekach, Apothca Inc., and I am the CEO.
Fantastic. What got you started in the cannabis industry?
It's a good question, and it kind of delves into a few of your questions. But basically, I graduated from college in Babson College in 2009, and right out of college, I started a business with my brother where we made a 2.5 ounce shot called Dream Water, which is basically the exact opposite of 5 Hour Energy, and grew it from nothing to a pretty good company. I was in charge of all sales and marketing, and by the time I stepped back and had a new person take over the sales team at the end of 2014, I had us in about 35,000 stores in the United States, including most major retailers like Walgreens, CVS, Target, Kroger, Safeway, all the airport stores, etc. Plus, we were distributed in Canada, Mexico, Kuwait, and come online in China, and working on registrations in Saudi Arabia. So end of 2014, I was starting to look for what my next thing would be. My brother was the CEO, and the way that we function as a family was we have a holding company, and each of us are able to go and do our own thing, but most of the sweat equity is held by that holding company. So we all share with each other and we all help each other. And so at that point, the sales side of the business was not that exciting anymore because it was very routinized. I would go in to meet with a buyer once every 6 months, present my promotional plan, present my display plan, they would approve it, and it's done. So it wasn't much hard thinking at that point. And so I was looking for the next thing. And someone said, you should look at cannabis. And I thought I was too late to the game. Little did I know that I was very, very early. And for me, cannabis made sense, not because I was actually a big user, which I was not. And now I really just use more tinctures and edibles to help me sleep. But on my mom's side of the family, there is a history of some neurological issues. Her mom had early onset Alzheimer's that she got in her 40s. She passed away in her late 50s. And so seeing a bunch of the studies and the research that was done, cannabis seemed like it may be something that could help with those kinds of diseases. Fast forward to today, my uncle, my mom's older brother, has Alzheimer's, and my mom has Parkinson's. And my aunt has started to now give my uncle some cannabis, and it's been helpful for him. My mom still refuses to try it, but it's something that I think that makes sense from that perspective. Also, around the same time, my dad had a benign brain tumor that was starting to push against his optic nerve that they had to remove. Yeah. So 3 surgeries opening up his skull in a month. During that month, he was pumped full of Dilaudid, which is a very powerful opiate. And, thank God my dad's really strong and he didn't get addicted to it, but a lot of people would have been addicted after that much time. And so I saw cannabis as also something that could help relieve pain and help with this kind of opioid crisis that we're having in the United States. And so both of those combined, plus really doing my research in the industry, got me very excited about cannabis. And that's why I decided to start Apotheca.
Very nice.
So I told you I would delve into a bunch of questions with that one answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long did it take you from leaving in 2014 to the inception of Apotheca?
So end of 2014, I stepped back from Dreamwater. I didn't fully step back. We help each other, and I was intimately aware of and knowledgeable of a lot of the business. So I was still helping out whenever I could. But at that point, it was actually pretty quick. June 29th of 2015, we submitted our 3 medical applications to the Department of Public Health at the time in Massachusetts. And that's what really got us started.
Oh, very nice. So you were able to figure it out and turn it around pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, during 2014, I knew that the writing was on the wall, that both my brother and I didn't both need to be a dream water. And so I started to do a lot of exploration. Then I would take some trips to Colorado and to California, meet with lawyers and accountants to understand the industry, understand the legality. You have to get comfortable with violating federal law every single day that you wake up. And so I did a lot of research during that 2014 timeline.
I love that you said that, getting comfortable with violating federal law every day.
Yeah, well, one of the things I always tell people is I'm only comfortable violating one federal law at a time.
Pick your battles. Yeah, absolutely. So you have pretty much always been, in that case, an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and family background is very entrepreneurial. I'm a first-generation American, so I'm Latin. I actually have dual citizenship with the United States and Panama. And my dad and my mom and my uncle, they came to the United States in the early 70s, and my dad started a business at watch distribution, and so he started that, and then he eventually started a fragrance company where he started a chain of stores called Perfumania and grew it to be the largest specialty fragrance retailer with over 300 stores in 30 plus states by the time he sold controlling interest of it. So he started that with one store in Freeport, Maine, which was the only place that would allow him to have a discount fragrance store at the time. It was, I think, the first outlet mall. And then along the way, he also acquired a fragrance manufacturing company. Both of them were publicly traded companies, where he licensed, manufactured, and distributed worldwide fragrances under the brands of like Perry Ellis, Paris Hilton, Guess, Ocean Pacific, and a lot of other big ones. And that one he sold controlling interest in 2007. And the year after, one of my uncles and my dad started another company doing the same kind of fragrance manufacturing, but privately held, with the brands of Ed Hardy, True Religion, BCBG, Katy Perry, Adam Levine, and then sold that in 2012. So my dad's always been entrepreneurial. I grew up around it. My uncles are all entrepreneurial. So it's kind of like bred into me.
Yeah, absolutely. How has watching that and now being on your second business affected how you've approached this?
Well, it's, for me, it's really been about proving myself. My dad started with nothing and built a great business, multiple great businesses. And, now it's not just relying on him. I started my own things. Dream Water we sold in May of 2018. So that was one for one. And now, the cannabis business, it's a lot of work. And, contrary to what many people would think, my dad didn't give me a single penny to get it started. Mm-hmm. And so it was really bootstrapping, and it's been a hard business, much harder than I would have ever imagined. And, a lot of times patients, consumers, they don't understand what really goes into one of these businesses. They just think that everyone's making a boatload of money. But, last year is the first year that we actually turned a profit. Yeah. And it wasn't a big profit, but, it got us on the right track. And all along the way, you're dealing with so many different issues, from human capital perspective, from regulatory issues. I mean, Massachusetts has one of the hardest regulatory environments for cannabis in the country, if not the hardest to navigate. And that is always very complicated for so many different reasons. And then you still have the same pitfalls of any startup. Startups in general, 90+% of them fail within the first 5 years. So you still have those same pitfalls, plus a crazy regulated industry, and something that is really, really complicated, a very complicated plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The industry is not necessarily an easy place to operate. And I know a lot of cannabis businesses really struggle to turn a profit, especially in the first couple of years.
Oh, yeah. Very, very complicated.
Yeah, you guys really have to balance a lot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of sleepless nights. I had a whole sleepless quarter in 2019 where, it was a make or break moment for us, and thankfully we made it through it. And now, we're in growth mode, but it's definitely much more complicated than people think. Just because you charge $50 an eighth doesn't mean you're making boatloads of money. It's very, very expensive to run this business.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think was the major shift for you guys in the last 2 years?
Honestly, it was timing. We were racing against the clock. We had originally brought on a head grower that we thought was going to be very good for us.
Mhm.
First harvest was in August of 2018. It was all mold.
No.
Yeah, and that same day he resigned. So that was fun. And then, so I accepted some temporary pain to try and find the right new guy to run my cultivation. I left the old number 2 and number 3 in charge, knowing that they'll produce very little product, if any at all.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we're opening up the first 2 stores. But I waited. I was patient. I interviewed a whole lot of people. I went to go see a lot of different operations. And in the end, we hired someone officially in January of 2019. And it takes a little bit for him to put his fingerprints on the cultivation and really get it dialed in to where it needs to work. So for us, his let's say success really started to show in July of 2019. So we had a lot of good products. Almost a year later, we started to have good product, but still old genetics. And that was the starting point of turning the corner for us. So we just had to make it until we had the right product. And then we just had to make it until we were able to turn one of our stores into adult use, which was the Lynn store first. And that allowed us to start breathing and start thinking about how do we grow the business and how do we go from here. But it got tight. And then it got tight again when Governor Baker shut down the adult use business for 61 days.
Mm-hmm.
We worked really, really hard to not have to lay off people. We only had to lay off 3 people out of a 95-person team. But that also meant that our fixed costs and overhead basically stayed the same, but 90% of our sales were gone. So it was a real drain on cash flow. And coming out of that, we've been able to recover and do well again.
So it sounds like a lot of that pain is coming from making sure that you can verify your supply chain and know exactly where your product is coming from and the quality that's in it.
That is a big part of it. And, plants also take time. So one of the things that our new guy, and his name is Byron, one of the things he did was bring in a whole bunch of new genetics from some people he knew. But we started as seeds to make sure that it was very clean genetics.
Mm-hmm.
When you bring in clones, you're inviting a lot of issues. So we brought it in from seeds, and we put those seeds to germinate at the end of 2019, and that only started to hit store shelves a year later because it's a whole long process.
Yeah.
Things we cultivate, the things we harvest today won't be in the store for 3 months.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the wine industry in that way. This year's harvest is next year's product, and there's a big gap in between. Basically.
And so, you have to get the right genetics in the house, which we have now. You have to wait. The waiting is painful.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have awesome flower. I would put our flower against almost anyone else's in the state, and I think that we would come out on top. We are the first greenhouse in Massachusetts, and people thought that we couldn't make it work, but we're crushing indoor guys nowadays. Our yields are fantastic. The product coming out is fantastic. We also have very long cure time, so a lot of companies are trying to rush their product into the market to generate cash. And for us, what I decided when Byron brought it to me was, again, let's take a little temporary hit for long-term gain. And so we cure for 60 plus days now, and it's just worked into our schedule. So we harvest a room every single week. We plant a room every single week. So something's always going through the pipeline, and we cure for 60 days, whereas a lot of companies cure for 14 days or less. Some don't cure at all. After dry, they just go right into testing and packaging.
Wow, that's a big difference in the end product quality.
Absolutely. And like I said, it was a temporary hit because, I could have had a 7-day cure cycle or 14-day cure cycle. But I said, you know what, Byron, you think 60 days is where we need to be? Let's just work it into the schedule.
That's interesting. Something I've been seeing a lot of, and I'd be curious to get your opinion on this, is a lot of the large cannabis companies, the quote unquote MSO gang, has been really surprised by the increase in demand for craft cannabis, like what you guys are doing. and they weren't expecting consumers to have such a refined palate for cannabis.
Well, and I wouldn't even call what we're doing craft. You know, we're growing a lot, but we're treating everything that we grow as craft. So it's kind of like, I would say, a hybrid. And right now we're in planning stages to continue to expand. Right now our greenhouse is 32,500 square feet. And we're going to get to our 100,000 square foot, probably start construction end of this year. Yeah, we've learned how to do the greenhouses, and we love the product coming out. Our patients and guests are loving the product. And so we're going to double down on that.
Nice. So everything going on in the industry right now, a lot of things are changing. A lot of things are happening very quickly. What are you most excited about?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, I'm excited by the acceptance. So I started dating my now wife in 2015. I married her in 2016. And when we started dating, a lot of her friends were telling her, like, what the hell are you doing with this guy? He's a drug dealer. It's terrible. 2 years later, they're asking her, can I speak to your husband about how to get into the business? So, you know, it's the acceptance that I think is exciting, and it keeps accelerating. I mean, my grandmother, for forever, if someone asked her what I did for a living, she would get mad and say, don't even speak to me about that. Then it shifted into, he does something with medicine. And now she actually says he's in the marijuana business.
Oh, wow.
This is an almost 90-year-old woman.
It's so interesting to see how our own journeys in cannabis can impact our family members, especially those who are older and might not have the same level of knowledge about it.
Exactly. I mean, even my dad, when I started this, I went to speak to my mom and dad and get their permission for me to explore the business. And my dad was very, like, not even speaking about it. My mom was the one who actually said, go take a look and then come back and speak to us once you see what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And now my dad actually uses tincture to help him sleep.
That's awesome. So on the opposite side of that, you touched on a couple of things earlier, trends that you weren't too thrilled about seeing. What is one thing you think the industry really needs to get it together and change?
I think intelligent regulatory frameworks is the biggest hurdle. You know, you have two ends of the spectrum. In Massachusetts, while we have a great working relationship with the CCC and our compliance officers, a lot of times what they come up with from a regulatory perspective in a, let's say, white room translates differently than their end goals when they put it out into the market that we all have to follow. And so, like, for example, last year in the third and fourth quarter, testing in Massachusetts went from 5 to 7 days to 70 to 90 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And part of that reason is because the regulations started to say that you needed to test in 10-pound batches, which created a whole bunch of testing backlogs. Whereas before the 10-pound batches, let's say I have one room with 3 strains that is being harvested. Each of those strains that were grown in the same room with the same timeline, with the same nutrients, with the same everything, we created one batch out of each of those 3 strains. It could be a 100-pound batch because it's all grown in the same environment at the same time. And so all of a sudden that 100-pound batch now needs 10 tests versus 1. And so that's something that seems good on paper. Let's make it 10-pound batches to make sure that we are testing as small as makes sense. But then there's huge delays that create a lot of issues that they didn't think about. On the other hand, you have a state like California that they have regulations, but no one's enforcing it, and it's still a cluster F out there. You know, a lot of places operating without licenses, a lot of cultivators still shipping things across state lines, but with some level of protection from the state. And so they need to get their regulations together and some enforcement. So you have both extremes.
Yeah, it's a challenge when it's left up to the states, because you could be 20 minutes away from a border and have completely different laws to operate under.
Yeah. And sometimes it just don't make sense.
Yeah, sometimes the politicians don't really know what they're doing.
Exactly.
So as you look at your business over the last, 5-7 years, what is the biggest challenge you think you've overcome?
Oof. I mean, it's basically what I told you before, the lack of product, high infrastructure costs, and trying to turn that around so that the product that you're producing is able to at least cover your costs and maybe giving you a little bit of positive cash flow. That was 6 months of almost no sleep. I was sleeping 3-4 hours a night. My wife was really nice to me. Whenever she got mad at me about something stupid, she didn't even bring it up. She just knew how stressed I was. My CFO and I, we would text each other at 3-4 in the morning.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, product is at the end of the day what you need to make it work.
Exactly. So that was the most challenging time I've had.
So let me ask you this. You had a lot of opportunity then to outsource and bring in things that you could have sold for the same cost that probably would have lowered your production costs. Why didn't you do that?
What kind of things did you think I could have outsourced?
Could you have brought in flower from other growers or tinctures from other growers or topicals from anybody else?
So that's a good question, because when we read the Massachusetts regulations at the beginning, we saw it was going to be very hard to grow flower. Massachusetts, between the CCC/BPH back in the day and the Department of Agriculture, created real limitations on what you could use on the plants. Even things like H2O2, hydrogen peroxide, which quite literally turns into oxygen, is not allowed on the plants. And something that simple wouldn't have affected any kind of public health or safety if cultivators were allowed to use it. It could have helped in a significant way. So you can't use anything except organic compounds that have no EPA registration numbers. Think citric acid, lavender extract, things like that don't do much. So it makes it very hard to grow. And then on the other end of it, the testing requirements are very, very stringent, which is both a good and a bad thing. Most states test to the parts per million. Massachusetts tests to the parts per billion. So it makes it very hard to grow and then pass tests. And so looking at that, my focus was, let's get the flower right. Because if flower fails, the company that has the failed flower will extract it. It removes all those impurities and it creates clean extract. So I always saw we'll be able to buy wholesale concentrates, wholesale edibles, but flower is going to be very difficult. And that turned out to be the case. We were able to spot buy once in a while some flower from other companies, and we did whenever we could, but there was always very little available, if any. Whereas concentrates and edibles and extracts were available on the wholesale market, so we did buy those in. And now, fast forward to today, more flower is available. A lot of companies are using remediation machines, which we do not use to pass testing. The remediation machines affect the quality of the flower. So I could also be buying a lot of flower that went through remediation, and consumers won't be too happy with it. But we still do. Whenever we see good product, we now still buy it to increase our variety. We tend to like to have 10 to 15 strains in our store at any given moment. Most of it's ours, some of it's third parties. And so at the time, it was hard to outsource the flower side of things. Now it's a lot easier, but you also have to be careful about the quality. The remediation machines really do affect it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I've been hearing a lot, is there's no really good way to have quality assurance across the board when you go to different companies for cannabis.
Well, it really is this remediation. Some people use gamma rays, some it's just heating up the flower. It's one of the reasons why you have a lot of that hay smell, and it degrades the flower.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you look to the next 5 to 7 years, what do you see the future of your company as, but also the future of the industry?
So I'll start with my company. We're looking at expanding. So within Massachusetts, we're going to max out what we can do under the regulatory regime. We'll get to our 100,000 square feet of canopy next year. Our third store, we should be opening it up in August, which will be in Boston proper, in Jamaica Plain. So it'll open medical first before we add adult use to it. And that's going to be exciting for us. So maxing out our canopy in Mass, maxing out our 3 stores will be how we grow in Mass. Then we're also looking at other states. I think we're going to be applying in New York and New Jersey once those applications drop. If Florida ever opens up another application round, even though they should have years ago under the law, then we'll probably apply for it as well. But it's just about now smart organic growth. We're growing a lot through our own cash flow now, and it's making me feel really good.
That's awesome. What a turnaround for you guys.
Oh yeah. But I feel like no matter what happens, every business has that oh shit moment where you either make it, power through and suffer but power through and make it, or you fold. And with Dreamwater we had that moment. With Apotheca we had that moment. And in both scenarios, we never gave up. We never thought about giving up, and we were able to power through it and make it to the other side.
I love that. It's not so different from running another business.
It's not. It's more complicated because it adds a lot of other things. But now, in terms of the future of cannabis, I hate politicians. I hate government in general. And what I see happening federally is there's not going to be any legalization, is my opinion. I think that you'll see the Safe Banking Act passed. I think you could see the decriminalization of personal use and possession. But what people don't understand is both sides have their wedge issues that they like to raise money against. For Republicans, it's abortion. They like to try and push anti-abortion and pro-life stances only so much so that they can show their donors that they're doing something and keep raising tens of millions of dollars every election cycle to quote unquote do more without ever doing more. I think on the Democratic side, it's the same thing with marijuana. They want to show they're making progress and fighting a good fight, but they never want to legalize it because they want to keep that money flowing into them every election cycle. So that's why I don't think you'll see legalization on one end. The other end, with the IRS, you have a wonderful IRS code called 280E, which basically says if you're an illegal business, you still have to file your tax returns as an illegal business. And as an illegal business, you have to pay your taxes on your gross profit, which is sales minus cost of goods sold. So you can't deduct employee expenses, rent expenses, utilities, things like that. So you're paying, let's say, double what the normal corporate tax rate is, just for simple math. And so right now, if you're the government, you're making double the profits from these businesses. The businesses are still attracting a significant amount of investment, and they're still creating a significant amount of jobs. So if you're the government, why would you change the federal status of cannabis when you're still getting what you want, plus a lot more money? So I think those are the two big factors that will stop the legalization from happening.
That's a really good point. I did not know that about the IRS forms. How frustrating.
Oh, it's very frustrating. That's why people think cannabis companies make a lot of money, but we really don't.
A lot of overhead.
A lot of overhead and huge taxes.
Everybody sees cannabis as a pot to dip their finger in.
Exactly.
So as you've gone through this business journey, as you've grown as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, and in the cannabis industry, is there something that you're exceptionally proud of, either personally or professionally, that you don't get to share a lot?
Honestly, I'm very proud of my team.
Okay.
People don't understand, let's say outside people don't really understand what goes into making this business work. And a lot of it is human beings. And, you get complaints just like any other business, but our whole team really just works very, very hard to deliver excellent product with great service. Everyone from the cultivation to the retail side of things and everything in between. And people don't really get to know the team, like outside people don't really get to know the team and all the work that goes into it. And I do intimately, and I'm just very proud of that, of the team that we've built, the people that we have.
When customers come to your store, whether they're retail customers, adult use, or medical customers, what do you really want them to take away from their experience?
I want them to know that when they come to us, they could learn as much as they want. Our staff, our bud tenders are trained to really provide one-on-one service, even if it takes longer. And we want that experience to be translated for the guests and the patients, for them to have an excellent experience with us. You could walk into any cannabis store, but for us, when you walk into ours, we want our people to be smiling. We want them to be helpful, knowledgeable, and we do a lot to train them in that sense.
I think that's awesome. I think there's a big expectation from the public right now that when you go into a dispensary, your bud tenders are going to be knowledgeable and able to make educated recommendations. And I think in a lot of places, you're very surprised to find that that's not the case. You know, you can just kind of hire people off the street, stick them behind the counter, and let them sell.
Exactly. And you know, you got to treat your people right. You know, a lot of, whenever I do look at the Boston Trees Reddit page a bunch, and there's always a lot of complaints about how these businesses are run. A lot of the big MSOs really, you know, really focus on them. Some smaller companies, those complaints get focused on. And you know, for us, part of it is just treating your people right. And you know, from our perspective, everyone starts at least $15, so an hour. No one starts at less than that. We try and give good promotions. We try to promote from within a lot. We offer health insurance and dental insurance. Good PTO. We're pretty flexible with our people. If they have an emergency, we're very flexible with them as well. Mm-hmm. And our staff, I think we treat them with respect, and we treat them the way we would want to be treated. And that reflects in terms of their performance and their interactions with the guests and the patients.
That's awesome. I think there's such a big opportunity in cannabis right now for the creation of those kind of work environments where you're really approaching it from, these are people, they need some flexibility, and if we treat them well, they will treat us well.
That is exactly right.
I think that's awesome. There's a big push that I've been seeing, and I'd be curious to know if you've seen this too, for cannabis to really be a diverse and inclusive industry. Have you guys come across that?
Oh, absolutely. It's it's really baked into the regulations in Massachusetts in a big way. So it is a big push. And, you know, my personal viewpoint is I want to hire the best. I want the best person, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, regardless of all that. I just want the best people. And when you push that mentality from the top down, you get the right results. I mean, I look at my employee pool, and I can tell you of all of our registered agents, we have north of 65% women, minority, veterans, handicapped, people who live in places of disproportionate impact. That's 65% plus of our staff, of our registered agents. And that's not because I gave any of my managers quotas to hit. It's because I instill in them, I want the best. I don't give a crap about anything else about them. I just want the best.
Nice.
I mean, right now my two store managers are both women, and it didn't happen because they were women. It happened because they were great, and they were both promoted from within to that position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I know in New York, a big part of the regulations getting passed is the push for social equity and inclusion in the licensing. How have you seen that play out in Massachusetts?
So I think that it's always an admirable goal, but it's also very complicated to achieve, especially in highly regulated markets like Mass, and what I believe New York will end up being, because a lot of money is required to start any of these businesses. And it's not that easy to find it. You've got to really network your way in. You have to have a solid plan, and you have to be able to execute on that plan. And you have to be able to show that you could execute on the plan to keep raising the money. I think that's the biggest barrier. And I think that you see a lot of people a lot of well-heeled companies and people taking advantage of those programs. And you know, it's not something I ever want to do. I like to try and help whenever I can. And sometimes my staff comes to me and says, "Can you help me start my own business?" And I give them as much advice as they can, and I spend whatever, you know, whenever they want to schedule time with me, I'm always open to it. I try and help whenever I can. But also as a business, we're very limited. Like, would I like to be able to invest in some social equity and economic empowerment businesses? Yes, but I'm also scared of the potential ramifications of crossing the regulators doing that.
Absolutely. A lot of cannabis, because of how regulated it is, just comes down to politics.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think it's admirable pushes, but I think that more has to be done to help these people get started.
Absolutely. So as you guys are looking at expanding your greenhouse, expanding your growing and your production, how does sustainability and and organic farming practices, how does that play into that?
So like you just said, we're expanding. We have a greenhouse now. We're expanding into more greenhouse. Mm-hmm. Greenhouse uses the power of the sun as much as humanly possible. We have supplemental lighting, but we use the sun as much as we can. And as a result, our utility bills are probably 15% of what a similarly sized indoor facility would be. Okay. Yeah, so I'm really, really proud of that. And by using the greenhouse, I think that creates more sustainability in and of itself in a big way. And as we expand into another greenhouse, it's another greenhouse. It's to create that same kind of sustainability. This year, we're also going to have an outdoor harvest, which requires very little from environmental impact. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, one thing to always keep in mind, these are plants. They go through photosynthesis. They consume CO2 and they let out pure oxygen. And cannabis plants are actually particularly good at cleaning the air around them. So even aside from us being in a greenhouse, something that's similar to us or any indoor grower, we're planting plants. And whenever we cut one down, we put another one up. So I think that's something that gets kind of overlooked in this industry as well. We keep plants out there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know a lot in New York, there's some suspicion about the sustainability of growing outside because of the weather. And of course, the Massachusetts climate is very similar to ours. So how have you guys found the outdoor grow experience to be?
So this is our first year doing it. And so far, so good. You know, we took a different approach than the other outdoor growers in Massachusetts, knowing that the weather is tricky. You know, I saw images and videos of other outdoor growers putting their plants outside at the beginning of May. And then you had a terrible cold freeze that came in May and brought the ground temperatures to under 40 degrees, which really harms the plants. Mm-hmm. I also know that there's some companies that plant directly into the ground. Mm-hmm. Cannabis plants love to soak up everything that's in the soil. So you can't really control what's in the soil if you put it directly into the ground. And so we took a different path. The way we looked at it was, let's not try and push our luck. Let's take a little bit of smaller plants, you know, not 12-foot monsters, but let's go for 8-foot trees. Let's put the plants outside in the beginning of July instead of in May. We're going to harvest at the end of September instead of the traditional time of middle to end of October, just in case there's an early freeze. So we're going to go for 8-foot plants. We're also putting the plants directly into pots, so not into the soil. So we'll control all the nutrients that they get, which I think is a big deal. And we're also going to be using light deprivation. So we have hoop houses that will be able to deprive the plants of light when we need it to continue to remain dark, to get the 12 hours of darkness versus 12 hours of light when we're in flowering. So we've taken a very different approach than the other guys. I think we'll get one very good harvest out of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I know it can be a risk in a climate like this because, you know, it can snow on Mother's Day, it can snow on Labor Day. It really just depends.
Exactly. So that's why we didn't go for the 12-foot trees, we went for the 8-foot trees. Because I'd rather 8-foot trees with much less risk than 12-foot trees with huge risk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it's a collaborative effort, you know, coming to these decisions. It's really me working with our chief of agriculture to understand what are the gains and losses, what are the pros and cons of doing it this way, and then we try and make an informed decision. And then next year when we have our harvest, we can adjust dates based on what we learned this year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A lot of what you're doing right now is learning as you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's not really a good how to open a dispensary and start growing all your own cannabis handbook.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that when you started this company, you weren't actually a big cannabis consumer. So looking back at that, do you have any advice for people who are coming into cannabis for the first time or using it for the first time?
Start low and go slow. It's a mantra, I think, of the industry, but it really is true because, you know, for me, I started at 5 milligrams when I would use it at night through either tinctures or through edibles. And now I've learned how my body reacts to cannabis. And so daytime, I like 5 milligrams. Nighttime, I like 10 to 15 milligrams. But if you start at 10 to 15 and you're a novice and you could have a very bad reaction to it. And then that could turn you off of the product that could be beneficial in so many different ways. And so if you start low and you don't really feel much, you could keep increasing. It's easier to go up than to go down.
Absolutely. Do you approach your business or your entrepreneurship with any kind of mantra or mindset that you return to?
For me, it's just whatever it takes to get it done. Let's figure it out, and whatever it takes to get it done, let's get it done. And I like to empower my people to also work that way.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean allowing them to take the lead on things and then bring you solutions and just have you sign off on them rather than being intimately involved in everything?
Yep. For me, it took a lot to start really start delegating things. Mm-hmm. Even when we brought Byron on board to take over the cultivation, I only gave him part of it to start. Mm-hmm. So the actual cultivation and harvest side of things, but not the processing side of things. But after a few months of us working together, gave him more and more and more. Now he runs Fitchburg. I don't really know what happens on a minute day-to-day level. I see more of the bigger picture, and we have weekly calls with I have a weekly executive call where we have Byron, we have myself, my CFO, my director of HR, and my director of facilities and construction on one call. And then I have another weekly retail call where we have the managers, my retail coordinator, my marketing, all on one call as well. And that's when we discuss the bigger picture things, and then it's on them to implement it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that makes sense.
Well, it's not that easy to get there. Delegating is never an easy thing.
No, it's hard when you're a visionary to let go of things, even if you know that other people are better suited to execute.
Yeah, but one of the things I also like to think is I never want to be the smartest person in the room. If I'm the smartest person in the room, then that means I'm not mixing myself with the right people.
Absolutely. I hear that a lot in people that I talk to in cannabis, and I haven't heard that across other industries. So I think that's really interesting.
Well, for me, that's how it also was at Dreamwater. I'd never like to be the smartest person in the room. I'd rather learn than teach.
I love that. There's a lot to learn about cannabis. What is your favorite fact about cannabis that you learned throughout this journey?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I might not even have an answer. There's so much I've learned. I mean, I've gotten to really like learning about what it takes to grow this stuff. I probably couldn't grow cannabis if I tried, but I like to see it. I like to understand the process. I think it's really interesting. And at the end of the day, cannabis is a weed. So theoretically, it should be very easy to grow because weeds just grow. Mm-hmm. And it really isn't. It's so complicated to grow good cannabis. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is complicated. It's a tricky plant for something that just started in a very mountainous, remote, cold region.
Exactly. I mean, this stuff should just grow outside by itself, but it really doesn't. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. You would think that cannabis would just sprout up, and sometimes it does, but it takes a lot to get it there.
Exactly. And then to make it good, it takes even more.
And sometimes you're not quite sure how it all came together, but you're darn glad it did.
Exactly.
So as you go through this, and you're encountering these regulatory problems, you're encountering these problems at the state and federal level. Why cannabis? What keeps you going here?
Honestly, it's a challenge, and I like a good challenge. Like I mentioned, I wasn't being challenged anymore with Dreamwater because it became so routinized sales meetings and what I had to do to keep everything going. Mm-hmm. Here, every day is a new challenge. So I like that. I like having to use my brain for critical thinking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of benefits to the product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure with all the changing regulations and rules, it's a lot for you to keep up with.
Oh, absolutely.
How has it felt as you've progressed on this journey to watch your family start to change their mind and even start to see how cannabis could benefit them?
Honestly, it's really, really good. Like I said, it's one of the biggest changes I see happening across the country. It's such a short amount of time that the view on cannabis has changed so drastically that it's impressive and it feels good. It shows me that I was right. I like being right also.
Yeah, Absolutely. I feel that. I was able to get my mom to start trying CBD, and she's been just amazed by what it's been able to do for her.
That's great. You know, someone once told me something very interesting, because we look at cannabis and we say it has all these medical benefits. But how could one plant have so many medical benefits in so many different areas? And so someone once told me it's not that it doesn't have medical benefits. And they explain it like this. Your body needs cannabis, not necessarily cannabis, but cannabinoids. We have an endocannabinoid system within our body. So for the last 100 years, cannabis has been frowned upon. Don't use it. Don't use it. Don't use it. It's a devil's weed. You know, it's going to destroy your life. It's a gateway drug. All these things. So if people were scared to take in these cannabinoids, which our endocannabinoid system needs. Mm-hmm. I mean, hell, even breastfeeding babies are getting cannabinoids through the breast milk. So it keeps them hungrier, gets them to be hungry again, and that's what calms them down. Mm-hmm. So from when you're born, you're actually introducing cannabinoids into your system, into your endocannabinoid system. So the parallel was, imagine if for the next 100 years, water was demonized across the world. You cannot drink water. Water is terrible. You must drink Coca-Cola. So for the next 100 years, humanity, all they did was drink Coca-Cola, never touched water. In 100 years, when the first person said, you know what, I'm going to drink this thing called water again, and all of a sudden their body starts reacting so great to it, and they start feeling so much better, and their health improves in so many different ways. Is it that water has medicinal properties, or is it just what the human body needs?
Interesting.
And so someone posed it to me like that. I'm like, damn, that's smart. It makes so much more sense than just saying cannabis fixes so much. Your body needs cannabinoids.
It helps you stay in homeostasis and maintain a really healthy equilibrium.
Exactly. Your body craves it. So if you deprive your body of something that it craves and you reintroduce it, of course it's going to help you in so many ways.
I love that. Like, are you hydrated? Have you consumed your cannabinoids today?
Basically.
I love that. The more I learn about the endocannabinoid system, the more convinced I am that it's really just going to revolutionize our understanding about our body and what it means to be healthy.
I think it has a possibility. I really do.
It's the fact that we grow up without knowing we have this incredible system that touches every aspect of our body and of our health, and we don't really know too much about how to make it healthy and how it specifically interacts with us. Is crazy. It's 2021.
I know, right? It's impressive.
It is. It's exciting to finally watch all these studies come out and to actually have tangible evidence for what this is doing for us.
Exactly.
So is there anything else you want people to know about you, to know about your company, to know about cannabis?
I think we touched on everything. We really delved into a lot here.
Awesome. I go ahead and stop the recording then.